LSP's mission manager.
Hi. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Chuck Tatro. I'm a mission manager for the Launch Services Program. Solar Orbiter is not one of the missions I'm managing. That's why I have the opportunity to come in and talk and present a little bit about what the Launch Services Program today does and what the launch vehicle is about. So, kind of say what the Launch Services Program is a small group of NASA agency, small group of the agency that's responsible for putting up all of the unmanned missions, all of the science probes, everything that goes to the moon, Jupiter, the sun, of course the sun, solar, we did Parker Solar Probe last year. We are responsible for making sure that those science missions have a launch vehicle that meets their delivery criteria, and to make sure that that launch vehicle has the highest probability of mission success. It's going to work right, it's going to go to the right place, it has our engineering insight into it. We also help, we're starting to help the NASA manned programs too, the Artemis program, Gateway program, in getting involved with when those projects are going to start using commercial launch vehicles, which they probably will have to, because we don't, as an agency, don't expect to make enough SLS launch vehicles to launch all of those Artemis elements. We're going to get involved in helping provide those commercial launch vehicles to help some of those Artemis elements, the ones that are unmanned at least. So the Launch Services Program is about 22 years old. We experienced our 21st anniversary last year. We typically launch 4 to 6 missions a year. This year we only have 3, but typically we launch 4 to 6 missions a year. And we have probably 60 to 70 missions that we're working in the pipeline for the agency and also for NOAA. And also occasionally we'll get a customer outside of NOAA or NASA that wants us to help them with the launch service. We also provide consulting services. For example, the agency's James Webb Space Telescope is going to launch on an Ariane rocket from South America through a partnership agreement with ESA, a different partnership than the Solar Orbiter partnership, but there again, another partnership where money does not change hands between ESA and the United States, but ESA says, hey, NASA and the United States, we'd like to contribute the launch service for the James Webb Space Telescope in exchange for us putting a couple of instruments on James Webb, so we get the science. So we see these collaboration experiments similar to what we have with Solar Orbiter all the time in the agency. And when we get called in, the Launch Services Program gets called in to try to help assess, say, how good or the capability of that Ariane space vehicle, that Ariane launch vehicle to launch James Webb. A few years ago, when the Grace follow-on mission was going to go on a foreign launch vehicle, we got involved in trying to help that be successful. That changed. They put it on a SpaceX Falcon rocket, and we launched on a U.S. provider. But we get involved with more than just the regular normal missions. We get called in to help. We also try to provide expertise to the commercial launch vehicle industry in the United States to help them be successful. So if a new rocket manufacturer, say a Firefly, or say now with Electron, Peter Beck's Rocket Lab says, hey, we'd like to be a competitor, or we'd like to participate in the commercial launch vehicle marketplace. Can you help us make our product more reliable, more successful? We try to provide our expertise to those companies without giving away any kind of trade secrets from another company. We say, hey, did you think about doing this? We don't say, well, X company does this, you need to do that. We just say, did you think about changing those flight valves to different material? Did you think about putting your propulsion tanks in a different place on the vehicle maybe, or doing different kind of testing? Or how's your engine production going? So we try to help them be successful, because we all, as consumers and as basically humans getting ready to go into space in a spacefaring nation in the next 30 to 40 years, we get humans up there, we'd like to have many different reliable rocket companies that we can call on to put humans up there, to put small payloads from universities, to put large scientific expeditions and observatories like Solar Orbiter. We'd like to have a marketplace where you can pick and choose what commercial launch vehicles you use. So you can just buy one, and you say, here's a delivery date, I'll have my spacecraft or my payload ready to go on this date, and this company, I'll put it into the orbit I need for me. So we're trying to help that the U.S. commercial launch vehicle be successful, industry be successul as well. So that's kind of an overview. I think there's some charts, but
Yes.
that's kind of what LSP does. We're about 700 people, 500 people or so, but split between Kennedy. There's a few people in the Denver resident office, there's a few people in Huntsville, there's a group in California at our Vandenberg launch site, and we get involved with launches, like I said, some advisory launches all over the globe in certain cases. So this again is the partner solar of the Solar Orbiter combined partnership agreement with ESA, with Airbus. Of course, ESA has contracted for spacecraft build, manufacture, and delivery from Airbus. And Airbus, basically, the Airbus and ESA team work together very collaboratively. And since ESA Airbus has come over and processed the spacecraft over the Astrotech processing facility in Titusville, then we've started to get real involved with the team on a day-to-day basis to basically make sure that the launch vehicle is getting ready at the same time that the spacecraft is. We've been working on the launch provider part of this solution for Solar Orbiter since about July 2016. So I know that a lot of the Solar Orbiter team has been working on the mission about 10 years. We've been helping them for probably about the last 5 years or so. So that's kind of an overview. I think this is you've probably seen this in some of the other things. This is an expanded view. We don't like to say exploded view. We like to say rocket people don't like explode, okay? It's an expanded view of the configuration we're going to use to launch Solar Orbiter. In this case, a lot of our launches, many of our launches are higher energy launches, and so require more solid rocket boosters than just this one. This is a single solid rocket booster to help it get off the pad a little quicker to get the initial energy into the trajectory. And of course, a lot of our missions, most of our NASA science missions that are going beyond low Earth orbit use the single engine Centaur second stage because it has a little higher performance for the missions that are going to go on long trajectories outside of the Earth's orbit. And then of course, you've got Solar Orbiter on the top. This is kind of what's going to happen on, sorry, you're perfect timing, on Sunday night. 11:03 a.m. is the 11:03 p.m. is the target time. You see the thing Dr. Zuberkin, or the administrator, put out a note last week. We're getting ready for Solar Orbiter launch at 11:03 a.m. I was like, Tim, did they change the launch date? That's our launch director. He said, no, it's okay. I said, well, just tell him that you found the error, not me. Don't put my name associated with it. It's going to be 11:03 p.m. on Sunday night. It should be a really nice night for launch. The nights lately, especially with this dry weather coming in, you see lots of stars. It should be really good observing. The fairing probably won't be able to see the fairing come off because it happens so late. It happens almost 4 and a half minutes after launch, and by that time, it's usually already over the horizon, and you would be lucky to even see the second stage engine glow, even on a clear night. So probably the only thing you're going to be able to see really is the booster come off, and when that booster comes off, you'll occasionally get a glint when that booster is tumbling back, and you'll see the glow of that exhaust of the engine bell from the solid rocket booster. And then, of course, you'll see the main engine firing, I think, for about until almost 4 minutes. Main booster engine cut off, yeah, 4 minutes and 3 seconds. So that first stage is going to be burning for 4 minutes. So it pretty much takes it all the way over to the horizon where it'll kind of disappear in the haze. But hopefully it should be a good night for that. So that's kind of a quick and dirty introduction. Most of the people are still sitting in the flight readiness review, the launch readiness review this morning. It's going really well. They're about halfway through that, and we are not working any major issues on the rocket, the launch vehicle. We're not working any issues on the spacecraft. Everyone's pretty much ready to go. They will roll out the launch vehicle Saturday afternoon, I think. Some of you may have a media event on that day. And it firstly rolls out of the vertical assembly building and over to the launch pad, which is about 500 to 600 feet away, 600 meters away from the vertical integration facility. At that point, everything's hooked up and it's ready for launch. They can do that as late as 12 hours before launch, so if they wanted to, they could roll it out around 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. If the weather was really bad on Saturday, which we don't predict it to be, they could wait and roll the vehicle later in the day to protect it inside the vertical integration facility for as long as they needed to. But we don't expect that. I think that's why they're expecting to roll it over on Saturday morning. They like to roll during the daylight hours if possible, so they'll probably pick a time, 9 or 10 a.m. on Saturday to roll it over from the VIF to the
How
launch
long does
pad.
it take to roll over?
It takes about an hour. No, it takes about 2 hours to roll over. They go pretty slowly, and it's pushed. They have these old converted railroad tug cars that essentially push the entire mobile launch platform. It's like a small mobile launch platform that was built for shuttle, but it's just got not as gigantic, and they push it out with these two converted electric rail tugs over into the position on the launch pad over the flame trench, and then they batten it down, buckle it down, close up doors and things like that, and then they're ready to do the launch countdown. Starts about 6 or 7 hours before T0 is when they start to open the launch countdown procedure and start to bring up the electrical systems, and the last couple hours they add the cryogenic propellants. The RP1, that's the refined kerosene that's in the bottom of the first stage, is already on board because it was put on during wet dress rehearsal. That kerosene also in the very bottom end of the first stage tank helps lower the center of gravity of the rocket while it's sitting out there in the wind, so that before they fill up the upper tanks, it's more stable on the launch pad. So that allows them to roll it back and forth with less worry about the wind, because they have that RP1, like having to, having like sand or heaviness in the bottom of the rocket that aids in them being able to do that. So what kinds of questions do you guys have about? That's what I kind of had planned to do, is just open up the questions.
Perfect.
Is that okay? Yeah.
You probably don't even know, but about how many vehicles does the Launch Services Program offer to customers?
Really good question. How many? We have 8 or 10 different launch vehicles on our non-NASA Launch Services contract, which is sort of like a menu. We have a spacecraft customer, they come to us and they go, well, I'd like to have filet mignon tonight. These are trim. They say, well, I need a launch vehicle that can lift 1,000 kilograms to this orbit. I need to get Pluto New Horizons, which was about 750 kilograms to Pluto. So basically, based on that and what the energy is, we have generally a list of available launch services on this menu that are pre-priced and pre-authorized to be able to award or give to our NASA contracts. And we'll pick one off of there, we'll consult with the spacecraft, we'll say, hey, we think it's in this class, but let's do a competitive procurement for it. So give me your requirements, and we'll let all of these providers on our commercial menu contract compete to see which one of those guys can do it for a reasonable cost, for the right technical approach, and for the right schedule. And we basically let those people that are on our NLS contract menu compete for that launch service. So that's how we hopefully get a better price.
Are there any rockets on that list that are being worked on but haven't actually been developed fully yet?
No, we do not allow rockets on that list until they're, well, yes and no. We won't allow one of our NASA spacecraft to fly on a rocket until it's had at least 3 successful flights. But we will allow a provider to bid to compete for a mission if it's had at least 1 successful flight. So if you come to me and say, I'm building a rocket in my garage, I'm Acme Rockets, I've got Wile E. Coyote helping me, and things like that, we would not basically be able to give you a contract until you've taken us out and shown us that you've flown one of your Acme rockets successfully, then we'd let you compete. But in that competition, you'd have to tell us how you got from that 1 successful launch to 2 additional successful launches before you were going to fly our payload. Because we would still hold that Acme Rocket Company to the requirement of them one flight before we put you on our NLS contract, and 3 successful flights before you're going to launch one of our NASA spacecraft. Now, if it's a Mars spacecraft, if it's a solar orbiter, if it's one of our really high value, if it's one of the GO satellite spacecraft that's very high value, we would require more than just 3 successful flights of your rocket. We would like to see 7 or 14 based on how the performance of those rockets has been, because there's a worldwide trend that launch vehicles have a lot of failures in their first launches. Even if you think you have 1 successful, one successful launch, there's still a fairly high probability that your 2nd or your 3rd launch is not going to be successful. Either the rocket's going to fail, or it's not going to deliver the payload to the orbit they advertised it was, because of something that they're still working out on the launch vehicle design. It's a very difficult business to get a rocket correctly. And the fact that this new provider, Elon Musk and his team at SpaceX, have enabled in the last 10 years, 8 years, been able to develop a vehicle, actually about 10 years, develop a vehicle, change the vehicle, get it to where it brings back the booster successfully and lands them, it's been industry changing for this whole rocket industry worldwide, and not just in this country, but there are other countries in the world trying to figure out how they can do that too. And now looking at reusability, where before these were just expendable rocket parts and they just dumped the first stage in the ocean or landed on their people. If you're in China and you go, oh, we got some small towns on the downrange side, but that's okay, it probably isn't gonna hit them. Well, they've had some accidents over there in China with some of their launches. But now companies are starting to look, companies and countries, because in many countries, their space program is not a commercial space program, it's a government space program. And those rockets, for say India, China, Soviet Union, those are not really commercial rockets. Those are rockets that are highly subsidized and promoted and developed by their governments, because they realize that to get their assets into space, to be able to protect their people, to protect their countries, they need to have a homegrown launch vehicle capability. And we've seen in this country, however, with the development of Elon and his team at SpaceX, that a lot of those other countries, or a lot of those, not countries, but commercial countries, or commercial companies in other countries are coming to him for launch services. Satellites that would normally go on an Indian rocket, or a European rocket, or Japanese rocket are starting to approach Elon SpaceX company because these prices are very extremely competitive, ultra competitive at this point. So there's a lot going on in the launch vehicle industry.
Setting the bar.
Yeah, it's very innovative. It's wonderful to see. The first time I watched them bring back the booster cores for Falcon 9, I was like, they're never going to stop that in time. It's going to impact the Earth in a giant hulk, because it's supersonic.
Yeah.
You hear the sonic booms, and at that point, that piece of aluminum, that first stage and engine, is hurtling toward the Earth at a supersonic speed, and they got to bring that to altitude 0 and velocity 0 in just a couple of seconds. And their control system in their vehicle, their rocket, their engine, they only use one of the 9 engines to bring that thing back, works successfully, and has worked successfully repeated times. So that's pretty innovative.
Now with our Rocket Lab, I know they've launched their Electron successfully, but now that they're making changes to make it reusable, does that alter the certification like with you guys?
That's a great question. Did everyone hear the question? Does changes to the rocket alter the certification? Yes, it can. If the changes or the things that we're doing to the launch vehicle change things like major structure, change the way the propulsion system works, change a main engine, change the flight control system, we then say, hey, you've changed things that are important to the core functionality of that rocket, and we, NASA, if you want to launch on our rocket and you want us to keep our certification of your vehicle, you got to show us how you've done this and show that you still have the performance. Or we might come back and say, okay, you've made these bunch of changes, we want 3 successful flights of these changed rockets before we're going to put another high-value NASA payload on it. We may put some lower value NASA payloads on the rocket until we're sure about it, but our high value stuff, our solar orbiters, our Mars probes, our GOES satellites, we're not putting on your vehicle until we're sure that those changes that you've made have proven consistent with your performance and that we have a reliable rocket. Even worldwide, rockets that have been in a fleet in the inventory for 20 or 30 years, this is the Soyuz, the Progress, the Ariane, even the rockets that are developed worldwide and have a long flight history don't get to 100% reliability. They maybe get to 97, 98, 98.5, but it's not like you're producing cars, thousands of cars off an assembly line. And hopefully the SpaceX guys are trying to change that, where they produce rockets and parts that are reusable. They don't throw the thing away the first time. They build one, but it's not designed for 1 flight. They build one that's designed for 10 flights. And we think that that's going to help reliability and robustness too. But NASA's just starting to wrap our heads around how exactly we're going to say, okay, this is the 5th flight of that first stage booster. Is that as good as the first flight of that booster? Is it as good as the 10th flight? How do we measure that criterion? We're still trying to work out exactly how we do that. We're not sure, but we feel that we're going to have to do it because all the industry is going to go to reusable parts of the rocket for these larger launch vehicles. It's inevitable, and we've got to be able to get in front of it and be able to demonstrate for our NASA agency customers that we think that rocket is as reliable on the first flight or as it is on the 10th flight. And maybe it's not, but maybe we say, okay, it's burn-in, this rocket has 10 flights on it, it's actually more reliable than the first flight of this rocket. So, and we're just not sure about that yet. We're still learning, getting our heads around that. That's a very good question.
All right, well, thank you so much, Chuck.
Okay.
We are out of time.
All right, good.
Appreciate you coming and being
Thank you.
the
My pleasure.